Now, the difference between 100 random 90-year-olds in a room, okay, is you will never see those people again.
Yep.
Your parents, you're going to hear flack forever. If it, right, because you're unless it's
Yeah.
such there's such a chasm
A
there of
divide.
decision that
Yeah.
it's like, well, I'm writing these people off and I'm never going to see them again,
Yeah.
right? Which isn't generally the case. So you're going to keep seeing your parents at least on some level every now and again at bare minimum, and in which case they're going to remind you about the decision you made, and especially, God forbid, it doesn't work out, and then you have the whole "I told you" thing going
I
on.
told you so. That
Right,
one.
exactly. Right, and so you're going to see them repeatedly.
Yeah.
It's second to that, they also have known you your entire life, right? So they're not the 100 people in the room. You're getting an unbiased opinion, right? Because they don't know you. So there's nothing relative except for what it is that you're saying to
Yeah.
these people. They have
Yeah.
no other information aside from that.
Yeah.
It's where your parents know, like, well, you kind of struggle in this area of life, and this girl that you're talking to is certainly not going to help you in helping you find a job or whatever that those things are. You know what I mean? And so they know your strengths, they know your weaknesses, and they know what this girl is going to play into one or the other. Okay, so what would you tell a client or a student that had that type of rebuttal?
Yeah, okay, it's great, great, love it. I think that firstly, it's interesting to just look at whether the version of the individual, so the client, whether that version of them has been manufactured to please the parents in the first place. And so when the parents feel like they really know that individual, that client,
Mm-hmm.
whether they only know the version that they wanted him to be, that they wanted them to become. So there's like this like ideal, and it's called like golden boy syndrome. It's like, where
Yeah.
you like you're the perfect angelic son and you've always done everything that we wanted you to do. And so what I really try to help my clients to do is to try to break free of that. So I'm always like leaning towards self-actualization and starting to like make your own decisions, being autonomous, and recognizing that you have a right to live the life that you feel is appropriate for you, and that there's healthy ways to set boundaries even with Indian parents. Like, they're not impossible to communicate with, and it's not impossible to set and hold boundaries. And sometimes what you learn when you set and hold a boundary with a parent who cannot tolerate it is that that parent doesn't see you as your own person, and that they need to go through that boundary because it's the fact that you've only ever lived within the confines and the cage of their boundaries that the relationship is being intact until now. And sometimes rocking the boat a little bit is the healthiest thing that can possibly happen. And even if it ends up with an "I told you so," it's like, sometimes what happens with Indian guys is they go to uni, and uni in England is like just carnage for these Indian guys, because like
Yep.
all of a sudden, like, they're allowed to drink and they're allowed to go out to nightclubs and they're allowed to
Yeah.
talk.
Like have parties. Like big time.
Mom's like, I'm on the way. Save me a
Yep.
spot.
Definitely.
It becomes this very destructive, like proving the point that they are their own person, that they're so far away from being a real person because they've
Mhm.
only been this golden boy. They start to flip flop to the other side of that, how far they can push it. And so when we are living within the confines of like pleasing our parents and making sure that everybody's okay with our decisions every single time, the the pain point there is that when you finally break that, when you finally set your boundary and you and you communicate exactly what your needs are or what your desires are, and it all collapses, the relationship falls down, your mom doesn't talk to you, that's okay. Like, sometimes that needs to happen because sometimes mom needs to understand that you're actually old enough and that you have your own sovereign soul that is calling to you. And then the relationship can be rebuilt. But this is like the burning of the wood and then the ashes, and then the relationship is rebuilt out of the ashes as a totally different relationship where your parents start to see you as this adult with a voice and trust, and that they start to understand that their role in your life is one of a like a mentor or somebody who's like there for guidance, but that in the end you still have to make your own decisions every time. So I think just like learning how to set those boundaries, and that when you set a boundary, it's not that you're trying to control the other person. I think when adult children confront their parents, what they try to do is force the parents to change their behavior, and that really what they're doing is a delay tactic, that they don't want to go out and live their life yet. They would like to blame their parents and say, when my parents let me do it, then that's when I'm going to do what I want to do. And so they're putting the blame onto their parents, saying like, it's their behavior that's holding me back from being able to live my life. But when we set our boundaries with ourselves, instead of outwardly setting the boundaries, when we say like, I'm only going to live my life from my own truest self, and I'm only going to follow my intuition, or I'm going to date the girl that makes me feel happy and loved, and lose all of that societal pressure to like pick the partner. Like Dale, there's this like long list with that Indian suffer with, that you have like this tick box exercise where you're like, does she have this? Does she have this? Does she have this? Is she from this family? Is she from like that? And like, the list is long before you even get to like, do you like her? Is she a nice person? Like none of it's relevant, right? Like all of it's just like structure, like logistic stuff that's going to be acceptable to the community. And nowhere on the list does it say that she can be non-Indian, and nowhere on the list for me it's like I'm Gujarati, right? So Gujarat's like the northwestern state of India, and it's like on my list is like at the top it's Gujarati, and right beneath that is like the caste that she is within Gujarati, and it's like what like town is she from and stuff. It's like very very specific stuff that's so irrelevant to my relationships and my health and my future. And especially coming through the conscious parenting, like when you think about the future projection of having children, it's like what actually is going to be useful, valuable. And if I think about how important my children are going to be on the planet, like from a planetary perspective, like I don't want my partner to bring up like terrors that just go out and inflict a lot of pain.
Right.
So there's a lot more important stuff than what a parent might put on the list. And so anybody that like, it was a great question, but I would just urge them to stay strong and like be their own powerhouse.
Yeah, I get you. This is a question that I get very commonly, happens quite a bit. All right. And this is more relevant to, I know it's not relevant to where you're at, Siobhan, but in the West, like whether it be in London or anywhere in the United States, basically, what the limiting belief that I will run into, I'll get this question in DMs and whatnot, where it's like, well, yeah, like I can't get out there and really date because, I'm Indian and no women want to date Indian dudes. I'm brown. And so my choices are very limited and things like that, which is a huge limiting belief, right? But now I have a kind of a stock go-to response for that. But the thing is that I think, and maybe this is my own limiting belief, but I think that it falls on deaf ears quite often. And maybe it's because their limiting belief is so ingrained. But it could also be that I'm a 6'2" white dude. You know what I mean? So, so I was like, well, yeah.
Exactly.
But
I was going to say.
What's the stock answer at the moment?
My stock response to that is, you're afraid of being labeled a stereotype. Just break the stereotype. You're thinking that she has a narrative in her head as to what being Indian means. Just break through that narrative by forming your own narrative. And now you're the exception to the rule, not the rule. That's my go-to response.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's obviously much more minutia into what that would be, and depending on who the individual is and where they're from and all that kind of stuff. But that's the overarching theme, is that you're afraid of playing into a stereotype that you feel like that she holds on to. So just don't be that stereotype. You know what I mean? Like, be the exception to the rule. Like you're coming at it thinking she doesn't want to talk to a 30-year-old computer programmer with limited social skills, and isn't very stylish or robotic speaking type of a dynamic. You know what I mean? And that you would be right. She probably doesn't want to date that. So don't be that. Yes, be a computer programmer. That's your career. But that doesn't mean that you have to fit all these boxes that what you think a computer programmer is, right? You can still be fun. You can still be exciting. You can still express yourself. You can still communicate well. It's just you need to learn to do that. So break the stereotype. Be the exception to the rule. Maybe she may say, I don't normally date Indian guys, but I'll date this guy because he's cool and he's fun to be around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's usually my go-to kind of response to that.
Yeah, I love that. Excellent. Yeah. I mean, I think it's useful to just remind people that a lot of that stuff is in your control, because being Indian is like you being a sciencey computer science guy. Like, you got a boring career, like girls don't really want to talk about it. Like, that's not in your control. Like, you can't help that, but the rest you can. Like, do everything else that you can.
It's the story you tell. Like, again, even something like, okay, I work in IT as well, but like, and I work in cybersecurity, to be fair. That's kind of my thing. So like, but if I say like, directly cybersecurity, girls don't really like it. But the way I introduce it is like, I'm the online version of Batman. Like, that's literally how I introduce it. But that's why they find it fun and it works. Always. I've like always had positive responses to it. It's a fun way to, just be like, instead of saying cybersecurity, I just say, I'm just like, and they're like very interested, what does that like, mean? Like, what exactly? And it's a good conversation starter, and it just like works. But again, it's just the story, the way I said it. That's it. It's the same job, but just because I made it fun, it works.
Yeah.
And I started this because I was getting negative responses whenever I told cybersecurity, because everyone was like, are you going to hack my phone if we stop? Like, that's what they literally went to. And I was like, no. Like, but I was literally having girls kind of get creeped out because of it. So I just like, spinned it around like that, and that problem stopped. But, like, that's how it is. Like, people, have like some narrative in their mind. And it's like, you said, like, it's a stereotype. Same with like, oh, this one is a common one. As an Indian, I've always had this with like American girls. It's like, they think all Indian guys are creeps. Now, they heard stories or they met one online Indian guy who was a creep and probably sent her dick pics. Yeah, that probably guy was a creep, but that does not mean every Indian is a creep. But again, that's the narrative they have in their mind. So now, like you said, you have to kind of prove that you are the exception to the rule and not the rule. Like, that works. And I've had that, like, I've had girls who completely, like, in the beginning, they were like, I don't want to talk to you because you're an Indian. Like, I've literally had full on, like, the racist comments like that, like full on, just because you're an Indian, I'm no interest in talking to it. And I just played it around, like, took it as a shit test and, had fun with it.
Yep.
And then that person now, wants to date me and etc. etc. But that works simply because of, like you said, you break that stereotype into something that, yes, there are people like that, but that's not you, essentially.
Right. Yeah. And it's not about assimilation either. It's not like, well, like I have to, even though I'm Indian, I got to come across as a white dude or something. It's not even that. It's just being calibrated enough to know what's attractive and what isn't, accentuate the things that are attractive about you, and, kind of build up the things that aren't, and that's really all it boils down to. It's not like, I think sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, you would know better than I do, but I have the feeling, that, or impression, that a lot of times, especially when guys come over from India or Southeast Asia or something like that to the United States or to London, and they feel like that they have to change almost everything about them in order to fit in, and my response is absolutely not. You don't have to do that, but that doesn't mean that you go around being uncalibrated either. Like, guess what? I'm not going to go to a funeral and start trying to kick it with people at the, girls at the funeral. Why?
Yeah.
Because that would
Yep.
be uncalibrated to do that.
Yep.
When I was doing real estate, there was this old joke about like some real estate agents being so over the top and trying to advertise themselves that they would, because somebody died, and, there's a funeral going on, which means there's probably a house that needs to be sold. So they're going to the funeral wearing their real estate name tag and handing out cards at the funeral. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's super uncalibrated,
Yeah.
So, it's not about changing who you are at the core. It's just knowing your audience and being calibrated to that audience. That's all it is. Like, I'm going to talk to you guys significantly different than I'm going to talk to a kindergarten class.
Yep.
I just am, because you guys are adults. You have a different level of understanding. We can joke about different stuff that I can't joke around with a kindergarten class, or otherwise I'll go to jail. You know what I mean? So, I'm just going to talk to them different, but I'm not going to change who I am for either.
Right.
I'm just speaking differently. That's all. And so, anyway, what's your take on that, Rupin?
Yeah, calibration is the thing that you can change the most, and that you can improve and change any kind of interaction. So I love what both of you said there, because I do feel like Indian guys are challenged on the dating marketplace. It's like maybe at the bottom of the list of the pecking order, and that sometimes one thing that I've been really trying to introduce and encourage is like Indian guys kind of looking after each other in like social environments, because sometimes I like in England, in London, I don't think that white people necessarily have too much like concern. They're like, there's all these other white people here. It's nothing for them to even have any shred of anxiety about. But like sometimes like, other ethnicities, there might be like one or two black people in the room or something like that. And they might like look at each other and be like, yo, man, like you're the other black guy. Like,
Right. Like the head nod.
Yeah, like if we ever need to, like you're here and I'm here. And Indian guys will be like, yo, there's the other brown guy. Like I already hate him as well.
So he's reminding me I'm Indian.
Like you two both jumped on the podcast, like you're both like, I hate you, I hate each other. I hate this guy.
I know where the other brown guys are, because like that's who I need to stay away from, and that like they're like the person that's gonna bring down my social credibility if I'm like near them, or if I like become friends with them. And then there's this other thing which happens in the UK, which like that brown guys from one city will like immediately hate brown guys from another city, even though like we're already the minorities, and it's like really difficult already, and that you're then making more of a mess for everybody by just like fighting with people from Birmingham and fighting with people from Leeds. It's like, okay, like I get it, like there's a bit of a territory or whatever, like they're not us. But when we're in a room full of like other like local people, like white people, English people, it's like, okay, maybe at this moment we should like be on the same team rather than against each other. So what I've been trying to do is like every time I go somewhere and I see another brown guy, I'm always saying hello to them. I like go and give them a fist bump, and like what I've noticed is how unfriendly they are. Like they won't even put their hand up to give me that fist bump. They'll be like, do I know you? Like, why are you here? Like, kind of go away. It's like this immediate distance that we feel. And I feel like this is just the same sort of like, it comes from the generational patterns, and that we have like a lot of trouble with our dads, and that we don't really respect male authority. And it's like, it's difficult to feel comfortable in a social setting if you feel like you're on high alert, or that you are in danger in any way. So I really tried to like introduce this to everybody, and every time I go out with the boys, if they're all Indians, I'm like, hey guys, like there's another Indian guy over there, like he's one of our friends. He doesn't like, if he wants to come and sit with us, he's allowed. Like don't be kind of like distant from him, because it's already so hard for Indian guys in London to date. And like you, Shubham, you said that like maybe one guy did something to some girl one time and she's heard stories, but like I've heard much worse. I've heard that like there are loads of creepy Indian guys, and that like they
They
actually
are.
are like that, and it's very
I've heard
difficult
that's true. Yeah.
for women to trust Indian guys because there's just so much evidence that's stacked against it. And it's like it isn't necessarily just the narrative that we're telling ourselves inside that like it's difficult to date as an Indian guy. There's like all of this evidence outside as well, that there's all of this like there's this like real on the ground proof that it is really difficult for Indian guys. And so we have to get through all of that first to even get to the inner game, you know, like you have to like,
Yep.
you have to overcome all of this proof to realize that like that's not you, you're not that person. You can do a lot to make sure that you're not being creepy, and that yeah, you're gonna have to maybe get a few extra reps in, because the like if I'm with a white guy who's like going out for my coaching, we're doing a wingtip session in Piccadilly Circus, he goes up to like 8 girls and like 8 of them say hello back, and I go out with the brown guy and it's like one of them says hello back. It's
Yeah.
not it's not in his mind. It's not just like a fancy. It's like it is really there. But once you start to calibrate and once you start to work on your social interactions, and that you're coming at it from a much like more educated space, like I've noticed the transformation in my own approaches, where I was getting like, sorry I've got a boyfriend, sorry I've got a boyfriend, over and over again this time last year. And I've joined Modern Success and I've like really put in the time. I've gone to 2 retreats. I've like wanted to learn. I show up to Cosmos calls every single week. The last 3 weeks have like been transformational, and like obviously Dale, your call as well, when I show up to that one, is really profound. And like I mentioned to you, I think one of the things that I mentioned was that like I was feeling a bit too confident, and I needed some help with like, what do I actually am I getting wrong? Because I just keep going up and doing all these approaches and not really getting the results that I wanted.
Yeah.
And so just actually getting better at the social interaction has been the key. It wasn't that I'm brown, you know, it's not that
Right.
wasn't problem. It wasn't that I was Indian. It was that I was Indian and I was doing some things wrong. Whereas for the white guy, he doesn't have to do things as right. He can just show up and be like, hi. And like, that's sometimes enough to get the hi back. But as a brown guy, we come with all of this trouble, like this, all of this like social inadequacy, and that we don't know how to communicate, and that we have like a lot of other like things going on in our mind all the time. We're like very busy. So I think there's a lot of things that we have to work on. And once we do work on that, then we have just equal chances. Like the playing field is leveled, and that there isn't any racism that you experience. Like it all kind of goes away once you become an interesting person, once you know how to like show up as a high level individual, and that you start to make people feel good, that you give value, and that you're providing them with this like emotional state of positivity, that you leave a profit with every single encounter that you have. I think once you figure all of that out, that the challenge is not race anymore. The challenge is just that you're not that good yet, or that you have
Right.
Yeah.
All
that
right.
you
So
work on.
let me ask you this. All right. Oh, and by the way, dude, I came up with a great way to counter the boyfriend objection. Dude, like, and I stumbled upon it by accident just not that long ago while I was out shooting infields. And it has worked so well. Like, I haven't really started coaching it yet because I want to get a little bit more experience with it. But dude, it has just been a game changer when that objection comes up. So now you want to know what it is, right?
Exactly.
That was last year.
As I teased it for 45 seconds. So, dude, I was at the mall and I was shooting infield stuff, right? And I walk up to this girl that was working at a department store in the makeup section. And I said to her, you know, like, I mean, I started my conversation. It was going well and blah, blah, blah. And I dropped my number close on her. And she was like, oh, yeah. She was like, my number close is basically like, hey, you're a great conversationalist. How can we keep this conversation moving forward? Oh, we'll take my phone number, you know? So that's usually what I say. That's what I said to her. And she was like, we can't keep this conversation moving forward. And I was like, why not? You know? And she was like, I'm married. And I was like, this is what you need to do, girl. I was like, when you get home from work, tell your husband that there was this attractive, debonair, witty guy that was so much fun that was flirting with you at work just to get him jealous to buy you something nice. And she was like, oh my God, I'm totally going to do that. And so, and then I did it a few more times after that. It was just off the top of my head. It wasn't something I thought of ahead of time. It just popped in my head, you know? And I did it a few more times since then. And the other three didn't actually have boyfriends. You know, it was just something that they,
Yeah,
say that,
they say to say,
And so the other three that I've done that with, they're like, because I wasn't like, oh, I'm sorry. And, like, I didn't know, I didn't mean to bother you, like I wasn't reacting to it. And so the way that they took it was they were just like, yeah, that was a lie. I don't actually have a boyfriend, and I was like, well, that's too bad because he would have bought you something nice, like, so it just worked so well, man. But I got to do it a little bit more to start hearing more objections and things like that.
Yeah, it needs to be refined. But yeah, definitely like that's a witty one. That's definitely something I'm gonna try.
Yeah. Yeah.
My one was like this, Dale. I was saying, we only just met and you're already telling me all of your problems.
Ah, I like that too.
Yeah, like that pause that you took to understand what it meant, like it
Yeah.
was way longer for her every time. Like the girl that I was saying it to, I just stopped saying it after a while because it was like not working. And the girl was like, I don't know what you mean.
Then you have to explain the joke and it's no longer funny because you
Yeah,
have to
I'm just
explain
Yeah.
different. It's
Yeah.
like not worth it.
Well, I got one last kind of scenario for you, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. So now I had in my class on Friday, this had came up, and I'd said I even told homeboy in the class I was like, I got Rupin coming on with me. It's one of the UK guys. Okay. I was like, I got Rupin coming on my podcast on Sunday. I was like, I'm gonna ask him this specifically because maybe it's just a thing that I don't know. All right. Maybe there's something to what you're saying, and I'm just not aware of it because I don't live in the UK. Okay. So now I gave him what I believe to be pretty helpful advice to this problem, but I want to get your take on it. So what he said was basically, I'm summarizing, but his last however many, good interactions that he's had where, he's spending however much time, we'll just say 45 minutes, talking to some girl or whatever, maybe sometimes more, sometimes less. And he goes to get the phone number, right? And then they'll give him the phone number. It's not like that they're being like, no, I don't want to talk to you or, beat it or whatever the case is. They'll give him the phone number. But then after that, the vibe immediately changes where they're no longer fun and seemingly enjoying the interaction and things like that. And where it's just now it's like they're, I don't know, a little bit more reserved and quiet, not seeming to have as much fun and engaging as much and one word answers now and stuff like that. And so, and then when he reaches out, he never gets a response back, you know? And so what he was thinking is that maybe, like, because he's not native to the UK, he just came over there somewhat recently. All right. And so what he's thinking is that maybe it's some UK cultural thing that's tantamount to like something very serious, or like you're basically asking her to get into, be his girlfriend, for her to be his girlfriend, or something like that, like where it's like it went from fun and just vibing to all of a sudden elevated way too fast into almost a relationship type of dynamic or something like that. And I was like, you may be onto something, man. I'm like, honestly, I don't know because I'm not over there enough to get that assessment, but maybe, but I'm like, here's some ways to mitigate that and help with that. And I gave him some ideas to run with. But is that a thing?
I did find that in America, girls give out their phone number a little bit easier. I think there is a like an escalation, like what you're suggesting, that the phone number is like a bit more of a significant big deal over here. It's like that's when you really like somebody, that you'd give out your phone number. So, like I would wonder whether this the question is coming from somebody who's like their goal is to get the phone number, and so they're making sure that they get the phone number, or they get some form
That's
of
what I
contact.
told
Yeah, instead of having like a good interaction. Like 45 minutes is plenty of time to have a lot of fun. But maybe if she feels like, oh, he's only here for my phone number, and
him.
that it's not that he's actually here to have a nice time, and maybe the dip in conversation is because he feels like he's accomplished what he needs, and now he's just waiting for his chance to exit the conversation because he's
Dude,
got
you hit the nail on the head, dude. That's exactly almost, if you go back and watch what I told him, it is almost word for word what you just said.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense otherwise, because she wouldn't give her phone number out unless she was having a nice enough time, especially in England. I think there is some significance in what you were suggesting there, and that Instagram is just way more comfortable. But
That's I also said that. That was like, don't worry about the phone number then. Get her Instagram or Snapchat or something.
Yeah.
yeah, or just invite her out to the thing that you know that you're going to be at this time, and just say like,
Yeah,
meet me there. It's like it's just like you never really know, and like a lot of girls are different. Like
sure, of course.
London's full of girls that are not English as well, right? Like
Yeah,
you like it's a fraction of the people that are English
right.
there, in central London especially. So it's like all of these cultures mixed together, and like I'm sure that it's more to do with him and his interactions than to be like a rule that like a lot of women, especially if he's had multiple interactions where the same thing's happening. So I would recommend, like my suggestion would be to have a look at that and see if whether he's changing his energetic, the way that he's feeling after he's got the phone number, and whether he's like got a big smile on his face, like, yay, I did it. And like she's like, what the fuck is this? Like, I thought you wanted to meet
Yeah.
me, you wanted to hang out with me,
Right.
but instead you're just collecting my data, and like not sure like whether that was worth it for her
Right.
or not. And then there's also all these like steps that go before the phone number, which is like making sure that she's giving you the phone number for a reason. Like, why is she giving you that phone number? Like, can you implant a reason into the conversation,
Right.
so that she's like, yes, I really want
Yeah.
him to have my phone number so that I can have that reason fulfilled. Which is like something that I've found transformational when I'm taking the number. I almost like don't ask for the number sometimes. I don't bother asking for Instagram. It's like I'm not having enough of a fun time. I like I could, and lots of girls will give you their phone number. That as many girls as won't give you their phone number because they feel like it's too intimate, and a significant proportion of the other women will just give you their phone number so that the conversation ends, so that you will go away. And so, like, if I actually feel like I'm not having that much of a nice time, and I ask her for her phone number, she might give it to me, and she might give me a real phone number, because she knows that, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? He's just going to message me on WhatsApp, and then I'm going to block him. If he keeps messaging me, I'll block him. And
Yeah.
if he doesn't get the message when I don't reply, like,
Right. Yeah.
block,
No
what's
doubt.
the worst that can happen? Like,
Yeah.
he's not going to call me up like those diesel companies call me up for, like, selling PPI or something like that. It's like, that's not what that's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is like, hey, it's Rupin. Like, she'll give you the phone number just to end that conversation. So I'm starting to like move away from caring about that kind of stuff. Like,
Mhm.
went out this week with Mithu, who's one of the dating coaches that lives in Mexico, and he and I went to Carnaby Street, which is a great place to go and like meet girls, because there's shops on both sides. And I went with the intention of inviting people to an art exhibition that I went to yesterday. So I had the plan of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to invite people for, and that was
Yep.
that was the right strategy for me, because like London's so busy. You meet a girl, it's like if you wait a week to see her, she's had like three other relationships between now and then.
Right.
It's like
Right.
busy with work, she can't keep up with Pilates, like all of this stuff is just it's overwhelming being in London.
Mhm.
And so the plan right now is to always have plans for the weekend, like know where you're going to be, and only invite people to tomorrow's event. And if they can't make it, it's like almost like Sorry,
Oh
like
well.
I forget about you by the next time that I have an event. But if you want to stay in touch, like you can follow me on Instagram. And if you follow me on Instagram, she's gonna see a whole world of stuff that she wasn't expecting, like that I'm a dating coach and like that I do like all of these different events. So I'm just not that I'm not that invested in collecting data. I go through my Instagram least interacted with sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that girl from like meeting her somewhere, like, somewhere around the planet. It's like, just unfollow. It's like all of these people that I've never ever interacted with, haven't DM'd, like haven't liked my pictures. Like, why, what is the point? And it all came from like me wanting to connect with them, me wanting to create that like little strand in case anything ever happened. And sometimes it does, like sometimes it's a good connection, but I think sometimes also we're like too focused on prolonging the connection and miss out on the moment, like being present in that 45 minutes, enjoying that, like go for coffee now if you have a great time. Like that's really what the key ingredient is sometimes people are missing.
Yep. Well said, man. Well said. What's the best way that people can reach you?
Yeah, so I'm or present on Instagram, Rupin Rach, RUPINRACH. There's a free course in the bio, and if they're in London, I'm doing workshops every couple of weeks in Piccadilly Circus doing cold approach. So anybody from Modern Success normally is there, and just if you're a beginner or you want to perfect your skills and learn, then feel free to come to the workshop and just get in touch. Like my DMs are open to anybody that's trying to work on their relationships, especially that wants to come from like a healed perspective and start to understand how their patterns and their psychology and their consciousness is interfering and getting in the way of them having abundant romantic love lives that they want.
Yeah, dope. All right, Rupin. Appreciate you being here, man. This is great, great conversation. And guys, definitely check him out. In particularly, if you live in the UK, in particularly if you live in London. He just told you he goes out every couple of weeks. You have no excuse. You can find time in your schedule, even though you're behind in Pilates. You can find time in your schedule to get out there and really start to make it happen and heal internally and externally as well. So, guys, we'll see you in the next one.